Hey, quick note. If you are watching this before June 15th, 2024, you can actually win this engine plus $5,000 in cash to help pay for the taxes, which is definitely nice. Anyhow, it's being given away by our friends at Holley, and I'll put a link for you to apply to win in the description below. Good luck. Holley regularly partners with Prestige Motorsports to build giveaway engines a handful of times every year. It's a great program because the engines they're giving away are some real deal beasts, and they're really committed to giving back to the car enthusiast community, which has made them so successful. Anyhow, when the guys at Prestige and Holley put their heads together this time around to come up with a recipe for the build, they decided to show just how capable the LS platform can be without breaking the bank if you intelligently put together the right parts package. We're talking maximum fun and durability because, after all, an engine is definitely an investment, and nothing is a wet blanket on your automotive fun more than stuff that's constantly breaking down on you. So, every component chosen on this build is definitely high quality, but there are also shelf stock pieces that come with a reasonable price tag. This is a recipe for big fun with plenty of tire shredding torque and tons of durability. The build starts with an OEM cast iron block that came out of either a GM LQ4 or an LQ9, and now both are 6-liter truck and SUV engines. Prestige has already put this block through the complete inspection, machining, and blueprinting process, and the cylinder bores have been opened up 30 thousandths to 4 inches 30 thousandths. Assembler Cody McCleary prepares the short block. After fitting up the bearings and grinding the rings so that they're gapped at 20 thousandths for the top rings and 22 for the seconds, assembly can begin. The connecting rods are H-beam forgings that came from Liberty Performance Components. Now, you may not have heard of this brand, and that's probably because they only sell direct to engine builders. But the quality is really good, and Liberty's distribution methods help keep the cost down. Anyhow, the rods are 6 inches, 125 thousandths long from center to center, with a great set of ARP 2000 rod bolts securing them to the crank throws. Sitting on the end of the connecting rods will be a set of pistons from DSS Racing, forged out of high-strength 4032 aluminum. Now, we already told you that the block cylinder bores have been knocked out to 4 inches 30 thousandths. So that's the diameter of these flat tops. And the 2 valve reliefs account for just 5 cc's of negative space in the combustion chamber. They also have a modern slipper skirt design and a compression height of 1 inch 115 thousandths. Both the rod and the main bearings are from King. To go with the Liberty Performance rods, we're also using one of Liberty's forged LS crankshafts. Now, this is a stroker bumping the stock stroke of 3.622 inches up to an even 4. Combined with the 4 inch 30 thousandths bore, that brings total displacement to 408 cubic inches or 6.7 liters. This is the newer style crankshaft with a 58 tooth reluctor to provide more accurate crank position data to the ECU. And for an ECU, we'll be using a Holley Terminator X, by the way. Then our 4 main bolts per cap are torqued to 60 pounds, and the side bolts, after Cody applies a bit of silicone to keep them from weeping oil, are run down to 20. Finally, the rods and pistons can be installed. After confirming proper stretch, the rod bolts are torqued to 63 pounds. At top dead center, the tops of the pistons will extend just a few thousandths above the deck of the block to maximize the effect of the quench area. Now with the short block done, Cody hands the project off to lead assembler Larry Broker, who continues with the camshaft installation. To control the valvetrain, the guys at Prestige went with a hydraulic roller camshaft from Comp Cams. It's ground with 235 degrees of duration for the intake valves at 50 thousandths tappet lift and 243 for the exhaust. That's with 110 degrees of lobe separation on a 105 degree center line. Lobe lift is 365 thousandths of an inch for the intakes and just a touch more at 367 thousandths for the exhaust. Larry slides the cam in until it is just about in position, then uses a brush to lube all the cam journals before sliding it in the rest of the way. Larry confirms that the cam is properly timed in and moves on to the oil pump. A set of shims helps ensure the rotors are properly centered and nothing is bound up on the milling crank-driven pump before everything is bolted down solid. A stock timing cover and a stock style power bond truck damper finish up the front end. These are quality components and do the job while keeping costs down. Also, notice that the cam position sensor is up front on the timing cover like later model LS engines. This will be important later. Another difference from stock is the crank snout is cut with a keyway so the damper isn't just press fit on like OEM. This way there is no chance of slipping the damper on this build. The roller lifters are upgrades over the stock units, but they still utilize the ubiquitous LS lifter trays. Tie bar lifters may be sexier, but this system works as long as you don't have a crazy aggressive camshaft, and it saves significant money. Larry's preferred installation method for this is to lay the trays out upside down to pop the lifters in, and then drop the two pairs of lifters along with the tray in place as a single unit. The stock GM head gaskets are a quality multi-layer steel design, so Prestige stuck with a pair of these to seal off the combustion chambers. Now these cylinder heads are cool. They're Prestige Motorsports' own castings. The ports and combustion chambers are left as cast, but the casting quality overall is excellent. These are actually a sort of hybrid head. They use the better ports and combustion chambers of the high-performance LS7 engine, but the more common LS3 intake manifolds and exhaust headers will still bolt right up. The intake runners, by the way, are sized at 255 cc's, while the combustion chambers are 69 cc's. The valves are 2 inches 155 thousandths in diameter for the intakes and 1 inch 65 thousandths for the exhaust. And finally, with these 69 cc combustion chambers, the compression ratio will be 10.9 to 1. We're using a set of GM head bolts. The OEM head bolts are torqued to yield, which means use them once and throw them away. So these are new out of the box. The process of securing them is a little bit more complex than just torquing the spec like you would with a set of ARP head bolts. For these, Larry torques the bigger bolts to 25 pounds. Then he goes back and using an angle gauge, tightens them all 90 degrees, and then for the third go round, goes back and tightens them another 70 degrees. The smaller head bolts that secure the heads along the intake flange are just tightened to 25 foot-pounds. Whew, that's a lot of work. Now let's talk about the valve train. The valve springs are from PAC. They're secured to the cylinder heads at 1 inch 780 thousandths installed height, and they exert 140 pounds of pressure on the seat and 400 when the valves are fully open. After measuring up for correct pushrod length, we ended up with a set of 5/16 push rods that are 8 inches 150 thousandths long for both the intakes and exhaust. These have a 50 thousandths thick wall, and Larry applies a dab of high pressure lube to both ends before dropping them into place. The rocker arms are a stock replacement style that have upgraded trunnions for better durability when used with a more aggressive camshaft. They are the stock 1.7-to-1 ratio, which means gross valve lift will be 621 thousandths for the intakes and 624 for the exhaust. You will notice that the intake rockers are offset in the LS3 style to help clean up the geometry. The OEM block we're using is the older generation design that has the cam position sensor drop in at the back of the block. Now remember when I pointed out that the actual sensor is now up front on the timing cover like later model LS's? That's because it has to match up with the later model 58 tooth reluctor wheel. But we still have to go with the earlier style valley cover. This one is a billet aluminum unit from Holley that'll match up well with our black theme, which you'll see later on. The truss design, I think, looks pretty cool too. To plug the old hole for the cam position sensor, we're using this billet aluminum slug from ICT Billet. It's machined for a couple of O-rings to help keep the pressurized oil inside the block where it belongs. Now we probably could have saved a few bucks with a stock steam kit, but this hardline kit from Earl's is pretty sweet. The lines are stainless, so you don't have to worry about them ever rusting or corroding. The cast aluminum valve covers are from Holley and have coil mounts built in. The coils, as you can see, are from MSD. They're actually from MSD's Pro Power line, which have a whole lot more heat than stock coils, which will help ensure the air-fuel mixture lights off effectively in the upper RPM range where we'll be pushing this engine, which also helps with the added compression. I wanted to give you a look inside of the Holley ultra-low ram intake manifold before it got all bolted up to the engine. Low rams are designed to minimize the height of the intake manifold as well as the throttle body so that both can fit under the hood of a Corvette or some other low-slung sports car without having to cut holes in anything. Now, we've done testing with these at Prestige, and the ultra-low ram design does great in both naturally aspirated and boosted applications. Notice how the unit manages to sneak in a little extra runner length by extending the runners inside the plenum. But it also builds up the plenum walls around each runner to help maximize airflow. These Holley intakes are modular with different options so you can dial in the setup to your needs. Plus, it's easy to make changes if you need to because the intake uses O-rings instead of gaskets to seal everything up. So, for example, if you decide to add turbos or a centrifugal supercharger later on, you can swap out just the plenum top for one with a built-in burst panel instead of having to buy an entirely new intake manifold. And just to be safe, Larry adds a little dab of silicone at the parting lines. Here you can see how the throttle body snout for the front breather intake is angled down just a bit to help keep the throttle body nice and low. And for the throttle body, we're using one of Holley's 105mm units that can move an absolute ton of air. Once that's bolted up, Larry adds the throttle position sensor and the idle air intake controller. For fuel, we'll be using a set of 42 pound-per-hour injectors from Holley, and they're mounted into a set of billet fuel rails from, you guessed it, Holley. Hey, it's their engine giveaway after all. You will notice that the coil packs I showed you earlier are gone at this point. Larry had to take them off to get the fuel rails mounted up. So, if you're following along with the build of your own, avoid our mistake and make sure you do this first. The coils actually did go back on just fine after the rails were in place, so there was no problem there. All the engine accessories will be driven with Holley's mid-mount accessory drive system. This keeps all the components nice and tight to the engine so that it'll fit in the widest variety of engine bays and suspension setups possible. The Holley design is really smart because everything mounts off the custom water pump casting. Not only is it compact, but it also minimizes the number of brackets and spacers and everything else that just tends to complicate things. We'll be mounting up the full complement of accessories, power steering pump, alternator, and AC compressor to the serpentine belt system. And here's the finished build. I personally love the blacked out components. You can't see it really well here, but we're also using a blacked out Holley cast aluminum oil pan. Wait, here it is. I'm pretty sure that this is the F-body extra clearance pan here. To get it on the dyno and see how she runs. So it's dyno day. We're ready for the fun to start, and we can see exactly what this engine is capable of. As I mentioned earlier, this is not built to be a all-out pure horsepower screamer. This is meant to be a fun engine that can be daily driven, air conditioning, ride miles and miles and miles between rebuilds, and just have a lot of fun with it. So this is a project and seeing how we can intelligently choose components to work together best to make good power, but also good longevity. So everything here is aftermarket except for the stock block, but anything here that you see can be purchased in a catalog, can be at your door next day air the very next day. Nothing here is exotic or anything like that. So the fun is going to be to see how much we can make 93 octane fuel, easily available, and good for 100,000 miles or more. Let's see what we can do. That, my friends, is 580.8 horsepower at just 6,400 RPM and 518.1 pound-feet of torque at 4,900. Not bad at all for a naturally aspirated pump gas engine. And it's got plenty of torque down low, so you can run a realistic torque converter if you have an automatic transmission and drive it comfortably from stoplight to stoplight around town. Peak power came at the top of the dyno pull, but the curve was already starting to roll over, and we don't think there's that much more to be squeezed out by pushing any higher in the RPM range. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving us a like and maybe even buy a t-shirt. There's a 100% chance it'll make you look cooler. See you next time.